welcome to Big Future Club podcast. And today we've got our first guest, Suchi.
Yes.
So Suchi is a burnout coach. Is that what you call yourself? Or an overwhelm coach?
Not really.
How would you describe yourself?
I think I'm still figuring out
And
what the term should be.
Tell us your full name as well and what your business is
Sure.
as well.
So firstly, thank you for having me, Michael. My name is Suchitra Sivasankaran. I am currently building a brand that is under the umbrella of mental fitness, because I think I don't really subscribe to the term mental health so much anymore. And the brand is called Inside and Out. And it has 3 different pillars within the brand. One is we're building community, and then there's also the coaching element that's associated, which is currently just me doing one-on-ones or going to corporates. And we have a mental fitness marketplace that is just a curated space based on all the things that I've been discovering in my journey of going within. Because when I did get diagnosed with a burnout, I think I just didn't even know that the term was an official medical diagnosis, and I really didn't know what to do from there. I just understood how I felt. And so I thought, that painful chapter, if I could bring it purpose, one is to build a brand, but at the same time to create a space like fashion houses have their own, retail and retail. Like, why don't you have one for personal development? Like, it should be vogue to check in with yourself. So it's a mental fitness marketplace. And then finally, the products that are coming up, which is initially going to be a physical product that will work like a journal, just doing something very differently with checking in on your mental chatter, and then an app. And the app would be typically what works for people who just want to get started. But at the same time, if you're already deeply working on yourself, I feel it's that perfect space to keep consistency and use between your, say, therapy and coaching sessions and healing. It's just that thing that you get to keep to practice and to flex your mind, as I say. So
You know what's crazy, everybody, is that we were neighbours. So we
Yes.
lived next door to each other, and we bumped into each other whilst you were walking your dog in the
Yeah.
elevator or something. And the business model that you have is pretty similar to the business model that I have. So Big Future Club, it's a similar thing. It's like a
Yes.
mentor, like we do online mentoring, we do courses, it's a
Yes.
community, it's a marketplace.
Yes.
That vision is to be bigger than it is now. We do corporate stuff as well.
Yes.
So isn't it crazy that,
It
like
is.
we were literally neighbours and we found similar problems and we've identified how to solve them in different ways. So you're focusing on the overwhelm, like we focus on energetics.
Yes.
But it's very similar. It's like trying to help people.
No,
Yeah.
absolutely. And, I do think that, the more you kind of tune into yourself, I think it becomes so much easier to attract people in the same energetic
Correct,
space or
yeah.
wavelength. And I also think, the more clued into, I don't know, being connected with me, my purpose, and wanting to build a brand, I've just started to realize that when you're doing something a little bit disruptive, there's so much more power in collaboration as
Yeah.
opposed to, you still want to build your own blue ocean,
Yeah.
but you want to collaborate because that's what amplifies the change, right? The message that, let's say you're even disrupting men to start checking in with themselves. I mean,
Yeah.
you want that to be louder, you want it to be mainstream. And so I feel, I'm finally understanding that there's so much more power in collaborating to be able to amplify what your intention is, as opposed to really trying to build anything solo or in a silo, which I think anyway never works. But, there's so much of that competitive wiring that we've had in general, where it's always about like scarcity or like keeping what you're doing under the wraps. And I get it. You don't maybe want to make a loud noise before you finally put your stuff together. But I do think that the opposite is how it works, that
Yeah.
you should actually join hands to make louder an impact, louder a noise, because, collaboratively, I think it is what allows for your
Totally.
vision and mission to come to reality. So
I mean, that's why we call Big Future Club.
Yeah.
Because it's a collaboration,
Exactly.
And like this is the book that my mentor wrote, and he talks about this transition period we're in now, and you see it everywhere, like especially in Dubai, I see a lot of this, where we're transitioning exactly what you said from scarcity to this abundance mindset.
Yes.
Where instead of competition, it's collaboration.
Yeah.
Because actually there's enough to go around. You know, like we don't have to
Absolutely.
fight over
More
everything
than,
anymore.
yeah.
Like we can actually all help each other and all work together instead of thinking like I need to beat that person. You know,
Yeah.
and also I think like part of that, I don't know what you think about this, and we're going to talk about masculine and feminine later, but that's like a feminine energy that's coming up again. Like this
Yeah.
idea that we don't always fight and compete, we
Yeah.
collaborate. That's more of
Yeah.
a feminine energy that's coming back in.
Absolutely.
Do you feel that?
No, very much. Because I think if you look at it, even with leadership today, all of the things that we so call as soft skills, you're recognizing that they are the differentiators and they're not really soft. They're actually quite hard to cultivate, especially when you've, like in the case of men, you've had to suppress those, skills of empathy or practicing vulnerability. With women, you're more nurturing, you tend to have it, but you had to, women had to suppress it
'cause
too,
you're in
to
that
be in corporate.
marketplace.
Me working in oil and gas, I tried my level best to be a man because I just didn't want to ever have that be told to me that you're being so sensitive or you're being very vulnerable or whatever. So in weird
Women
ways,
get taught by men in corporate not to show emotion,
not to
don't
show
they?
emotion.
Because that's what we got taught.
Exactly. So
And then you want to be a man, and that doesn't work.
that
Do you know what I
doesn't
mean?
work
Yeah.
because you're already misaligning and then you're causing this imbalance of energy, which anyway
Correct.
you don't even have the knowledge about, right? So I think, for example, with burnout, for me, I now understand that it was anyways in the coming, like over a 10, 15-year period, because the more you disconnect with yourself and the more you distance what is natural to you as well, I think at some point it's like you versus you. You're very far away from who you really are meant to be in the core. And at that point, you don't even know who you are. Like you don't know what that even means.
Yeah.
And I think that's why probably all of the feminine, leading energetic qualities, if I may, which I think were suppressed because society defined success in a very one-dimensional way, that it's just money and power.
Yeah.
And I think it should be, I think money and power fully makes sense. And I think money and power allows you to be able to be of impact and do the things that matter to you. But it should be in tandem or in collab with mental fitness. That's what I'm calling it. But with working on yourself, because I think you want to tie that power and that money to what you are meant to bring to the table, right? And how do you do that without being curious about yourself, without wanting to discover yourself, understand your unique blueprint? And I think that if you're not practicing the balance between feminine and masculine, you're kind of in a place where you're imbalanced, and it will catch up. It will get to you at some point.
Tell me about your journey, because I have a burnout in my life. You know, and like for me, I was in the corporate world and I was working ridiculous hours. And there was one year in particular where I worked every day of the week, like from ridiculous hours. And what I found was the burnout for me was because I felt like I wasn't aligned with my sole purpose, if that makes sense. I felt like I was working really hard at something I didn't really believe in. And in the end, I just couldn't do it. Like I literally went on holiday, sat on a beach for a week, read The 4-Hour Work Week, which was a great book, which said like literally have, mini retirements in your life. I thought, absolutely. And what saved me from burnout, I was about to burn out, was having that break. But tell me about like your story, how you got to this point.
So, I've worked in oil and gas my whole life with the same company called Schlumberger, and I just, being an engineer, kind of walking into this space, it's a great place to work. They gave us this whole, opportunity to travel, to live in different countries, and then every time you got settled in a role, they'd throw you into a new role. So you always felt like change was within a very stable setup, like you know who you're working for and you know the people you're working for. Within that, there was always this element of change, which I think we want on many levels, right? So with culture, with a new location, with a new job, lots of things keep changing. And so I loved it. I thoroughly am grateful that this happened to me in my life and I joined this company. But I think over time, when I now look back and I have this, added awareness, I recognize that, being a woman, for me, coming from the culture that I did, being very so-called, what a lot of people throw at me, that you're very alpha, you're super ambitious and all of that, and also being married and kind of pushing the envelope all the time, because there were times when, I wanted to take a transfer to a location, which also meant that at home on the personal front, you're asking for a lot of things that were not conventional. And when I say conventional, because I didn't see any examples where, let's say, a woman was pursuing her career and your husband is equally doing well in his, but he's kind of accommodating the needs of yours, because you are a little bit pushing the envelope in an uncomfortable way.
Yeah.
And so I kept getting told, by people that I love and people who love me that, why do you need to do that? Or what are you running after? Or like, he's making such good money. Like, why do you
need to do that?
Why do I? So I found that I think consistently dealing with that internal, external conflict where you have this desire, but society has predefined for you on how you're supposed to be. And I'm constantly in conflict with what I want versus, the wiring that I have. Oh, I'm not a good person. I'm greedy.
Your rules for being a good wife.
Yeah, I'm not a good wife. I'm not a good daughter, because my parents were going through also a lot of inner turbulence. Like, why is she such a troublemaker and things like that? Why do you have to rebel all the time and ask so many questions? And then an equal parallel at work, which was a very male-dominated industry, and I wanted to get into leadership real fast. And I was always in tech. So again, a space where you're almost always just that one woman in the room, and to be heard, to be listened to with, respect. And that meant that dumbing down a lot of my natural instincts and playing, to the table like a man, because I'm like, I got that seat and there's no way I'm going to let it go. And I also took it upon me to be opening doors for people after me, like women in my team or people that I was, bringing on board to say, you can do this as well.
So that's a lot, isn't it?
That's
You're dealing
a lot.
like with all these cultural conditioning, family expectations, role expectations, industry expectations. That's a lot.
Very much, So I realize now that I think burnout was an inevitable gift, which was coming in like 10, 15 years. It's just compounding over time, because as you get probably older, you take on more responsibilities, and this voice within or conflict within is just getting louder and louder, because I've never attended to it. I've never even understood that, I'm kind of, doing or dealing with something that's not okay. And at some point, I remember about 1.5 years of feeling extremely alien in myself, where I generally like hanging out with people. And I had taken on a role which was kind of building a team in advanced analytics. So it had the need to recruit youngsters who were data scientists, and there were all these veterans within the organization who were doing business roles. So I was building a T-shaped team, and I am an ambivert. I love hanging out with people as well. I just didn't want to meet anyone. And I found it so strange. I was like, what's up with
You're
me?
almost shutting down.
I was shutting down, but I didn't understand it at all. Then I found that there was this, feeling of cynicism, where everything that I'd love to do, I'd gotten here, because this was the freaking hustle. I've gotten here. I'm almost calling myself that I'm making it. I'm actually making a dent in the tech space in oil and gas. And I was not able to show up, and I was finding that what's the point with what I'm doing, and what is the value I'm adding to life. And I had this very disconnected feeling with everything that I had worked so hard for up to that point. And I think in general, I start my day every day with either a shot of caffeine and coffee or green tea. And I just couldn't have caffeine. Every time I would drink, I would feel dizzy. And I just decided, I should stop having caffeine. I never correlated it to the fact that I think it's my body running on very high cortisol, for example. And so a lot of those kind of behavioral symptoms, I acknowledged them as something is strange, but I didn't see the need to do anything. Until I think, the book that I really love, though it's not like a breezy read, is the Your Body Keeps Score or something to that equivalent. And, I think it's just such an intelligent being, our human body, that because I wasn't paying attention emotionally, I think I started to have physical illness. Like I was constantly getting the flu, or I would land up having a back pain out of nowhere, continuous eye infections, and then I got the pink eye, and all sorts of things kept happening to me. That's when I was like, let's go and get a full body check.
Okay.
And nothing came out of it. Everything was perfect. I was perfectly fine. And so I kind of broke down in the doctor's office, because I was like, I'm not fine. I'm not functioning well. I sometimes was canceling all the errands I had in the day, sleeping for like 12 to 15 hours, and I would still feel I'm just not able to make any decisions. I don't want to go out and face the day. It's just this exhaustion at another level.
Do you think, like I want to ask you a question because I went through a very similar thing.
Yes.
Do you think like as you get higher up in the corporate organization,
Yeah.
you're more like susceptible to that? Because what I find is as you get further up, it's almost like lonelier, if that makes sense. Like the more leadership you get. And
Yes.
I think a lot of CEOs really feel that loneliness.
Lonely, yeah, I've read,
because you're not really like having these discussions with people,
Yes.
if you know what I mean. And you're also working in a different way, you know, so you're responsible for more other people's emotions.
Yes.
Like in an organization, there's a lot of like politics and emotional things going on. And when you're like a junior, you don't really get exposed to that as much.
Yeah.
But when you get senior, you realize like 90% of your job as a CEO or a leader is dealing with other people's shit.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It really is.
Absolutely.
And then you'll take that on board, but no one's dealing with yours. So you're almost like keeping it to yourself. Is that something that you noticed?
No, I think it completely makes sense because, you know, I understand it even more being an entrepreneur now, that how, at least when you're in corporate, you tend to have a little bit of camaraderie because there is someone at work that you're friends with.
Yeah.
So you're right, the higher up you go, the lonelier you feel, but you still have a sense of like your network and your people, right? But I notice more when you're building your own company.
Yeah.
I think it's your friends are outside. Like you don't really have any friends within yourself, right? So you kind of notice that it is genuinely a lonely journey, and
entrepreneurship it can be very lonely.
And I completely agree with you that it's a huge contributor to burnout when you're not aware. This is what I realize now. I think when you don't understand that you could burn out doing what you love, you could also burn out doing, like you said, you're in a job that's you're working your ass off, but you don't want to. It's not what you love. It's not meeting your purpose. Right?
That was the other thing I was going to ask you. Like, what I found is that I got like higher up the organization, I thought more about what is the purpose of this organization, and I couldn't really align it with my purpose.
Right.
Whereas when you're just doing your job and you're learning and you learn new skills, you're like, I don't really care. Like, I'm just like growing and learning. That's great.
Yeah.
But when you get to the point of like, okay, I'm almost at the top or leading this organization and I don't feel like it's contributing to the world. Like, then it's almost like, oh, I do feel like, what am I doing? You know, and then you start to burn out because you put all this effort into something that's not actually aligned with what you're trying to achieve.
Absolutely. I think, you know, I do think though that one of the symptoms of anybody who's trying to see or think that, you know, maybe you're having a potential burnout is you do develop cynicism. I feel that in your case, like you recognize that. I
got very cynical about the whole industry.
Yes.
Like,
but I also think that a part of you seems to have recognized before that this isn't your purpose and you are looking for something that is purposeful and alignment with you. And I think you would have discovered that maybe it is something that's a hobby or a passion, or it's a whole new career, right? I mean, it could be anything. In my case, I definitely didn't have any of that awareness or understanding because I felt that who I was working for and what I was building and doing was, you know, just cutting edge. It was just wow.
Yeah.
And when I developed cynicism, I didn't even know to think that, oh, you know, I am, first of all, burning out, because I always looked at that term as a glamorized way to say I'm just tired. And no one, you know, you didn't talk about it in a medical or a more, as something that can happen to people in a hormonal way. You always used it like, oh, I'm just so burned out, like I'm burning out. And so I kind of, you know, never
like
took it seriously.
Like a failure or a weakness, was it?
Exactly, or like saying that I'm tired. And you're like, who has time to be tired? You know, hustle doesn't match with being tired or taking rest, for example. You're not allowed to take rest. I mean, if my dad, when I was growing up, he'd see me just sitting in the corner doing nothing, he'd be like, what are you doing there? Just get up and go study. Like, he would just push me to keep all the time being busy and all the time doing something. Like, rest was for losers. And if I failed, it was like called out, you know, that, oh, you're so stupid and you don't know how to do whatever. So I really ran away from, you know, ever putting myself in a place where I could potentially fail. And I never, ever embraced rest. Like, rest was a guilty emotion for me.
Really? That's
I'm not allowed to rest because it's like, who rests? And so even when I would feel this exhaustion. My inner dialogue would be like, exhausted from what? Like, that's how I would talk back to myself. Like, what are you exhausted from? Like, what have you achieved? Like, what have you really done to be exhausted? And so I think that wiring led me to a place where it brings a lot of greatness. Like, I think all the hustling and the success and the pushing through and all of that, credit to this wiring, right? But I think the flip side, or the unfortunate side, is you are so disconnected with yourself that you don't realize you're doing, it's like DJ Khaled has an album that says suffering for the win. Like, you don't realize you're actually suffering for your wins, and that's not how it's supposed to be done. You still want the hustle, you still want to win, but you want to do it with affection and compassion for yourself. That's the part that I did not have a clue about. And so I think when I did get a diagnosis that I'm basically potentially headed to a full burnout.
Oh, the doctor did say that?
Yes. And she sent me to a functional doctor, which is why I keep saying to her, like, I am indebted to you forever. Because
what is a functional doctor?
So a functional doctor is the one who specializes in your hormone panel,
Right,
so they do the full hormone panel check. And sometimes you don't know, I mean, you could be feeling these symptoms, like some of these symptoms, because you have a thyroid imbalance or an insulin imbalance. So they wanted to check everything, and it turned out that cortisol was my hero ingredient, And I found what I loved about that, though, was everything that was behaviorally shifted in me. And then when you tie it to why this amount of cortisol in the body and the extreme fluctuations show that you're operating in fight or flight, was very satisfying. I'm quite analytical, so connecting the dots was like, that makes sense, that why I've been feeling this way, I've been behaving this way, why my body has been, kind of having these, I think, fake illnesses, because it's actually asking for you to pay attention.
To pause for a bit.
Yeah, exactly. So that's how I got to that space of understanding that, I don't know what to do with this, but basically my body is functioning at a survival state. And that's why
you became aware of that.
I became aware of that.
So you knew something wasn't right.
I knew
then you got diagnosed, and there was something out of balance there.
And the reason I went to get any kind of diagnosis was only because I was falling physically ill.
Yeah.
So I looked at it as, you've got jaundice, like, you got to go to the doctor. I'm falling sick, I should go to the doctor. But I was hoping for something to show up, and when nothing did, then I broke down, because I don't feel like myself, but I physically don't seem to, none of my stats are off. So the functional doctor is where it came through, and then, they do like a 48-hour check on plotting your cortisol fluctuations, and then you land up seeing that if you continued this way, you would go into chronic fatigue or chronic stress, which is then apparently a state where your brain doesn't understand a simple decision versus a complex one. It's just, I'm constantly stressed.
Just in survival all the time.
Do you want a coffee? Do you want a black coffee? Would be too much of a decision to make. But I also understood at that stage why decision was hard for me, because I think my brain had gone on like an overdose. Like, I'm done. I can't do any decision making for you. So you're in like an emotional bankruptcy, I think a decision making bankruptcy. It's like you're sort of feeling a fatigue on many levels.
Yeah.
And that's when I think the burnout is walking in. It's like you have to shut down, because I can't operate beyond survival.
Yeah.
And that's when I think I got the knowledge, though.
Yeah. In our model with energy, we call that energy poor.
Yeah.
So it's basically like most of the time, like you're in energy neutral, and that's just like just status quo, everything's okay. Sometimes you go energy rich, and that's like everything's magical, everything happens, everything's instant. Sometimes you go super rich when you fall in love or something like that. But you can drop to energy poor, and when you drop to energy poor, all your body goes into survival, all your systems shut down. All you want to do is make life smaller, not bigger. And you've got to, at that point, you can feel totally helpless.
Absolutely.
And that's when you need like an intervention or someone to come along to help you.
No, definitely, because you do feel helpless, because also you're kind of walking into a state that you don't recognize for yourself. You're like, this is not who you are, so what is happening? And I also found that when I would speak about it, like I'm going through a little bit of a struggle, the very standard response was, you just need a vacation, or, you just need to take some rest, like sleep a little bit this weekend, don't work through the weekend. And
Which can help.
And I did. I did those things, but this behavioral shift didn't go.
Your energy was still dropped.
Leave, because I think ultimately you've reached that place because you're hugely disconnected from yourself.
Yeah.
And so until you start pouring or filling in your cup, which I've read a million times before, but it's never made sense to me. I think now I understand that you need to also just that's why I like calling it a mental fitness brand, that just like you understand how you take care of your body on a daily basis in small or big ways, you have to do the same for your mind. And if you're not doing that for your mind, it's, I think, almost defeating the purpose to expect anyone else to be able to do it for you, because how are you even going to communicate what your needs are if you're not able to speak to yourself? And I think that moment when I understood that that's what was happening to me internally, I really didn't know what I was supposed to do with this, but I was like, I'm going to take a sabbatical, because I just thought, in the grand scheme of life, if I had one chapter to look back and I said I didn't dedicate a single chapter to know who I am, what's the point of all this? I mean, this hustle has no purpose. This money has not any meaning because it's not serving me. And that's the beauty of this money being energy, right? This energy should empower me, not put me in a place where I don't even know who I am. And I think that's when I was like, fine, I'm going to take a think break, as you call it, and I'm going to try and understand who I am. And I didn't really know what it meant, but I was like, I deserve a space or a chapter in my book of life, and I'm going to call it Project Suchi.
Did you?
Yeah.
That's exactly what I did. So I went back, took a holiday, read 4-hour work week, went back, handed my notice in, had to work 3 months.
Yes.
But then I literally said, I'm going to give myself a year, and I'm going to create a vacuum.
Wow.
So I'm going to literally focus on nothing on purpose.
Wow.
And people would come and ask me, what do you do? I said, nothing. And they're like, what?
Oh my God.
And it literally would blow people's minds. They're like, what do you mean you do nothing? I said, I'm having a year of doing nothing, absolutely nothing.
Oh my God.
And I did. I traveled, and because what happens is when you create that vacuum, things start to fill it.
Absolutely.
But
oh my God.
but for me, that was the solution. I didn't have any knowledge or skills at that point. I hadn't done any training, but I knew I needed a break. I knew that. I instinctively knew that.
Gosh, I knew I needed a break, but my start was a disaster.
Was it?
You needed a break.
I'm not sure mine was perfect, but it was like...
But, I don't know how you decided to handle your break and create that vacuum. For me, I feel like that's already someone who understands themselves a little bit, not even a little bit, quite a bit, because, or maybe it's cultural wiring or something like that, because I feel... Today, I literally practice the art of doing nothing. I have these pockets deliberately in my week where I'm like, this half hour, I'm going to think of nothing.
Yeah.
And then, just to give it a little bit of a, suave, I'm like dolce far niente, practice the Italian art of doing nothing. Or the sweetness of doing nothing. Yeah. But, I took the break, which I thought was one of the boldest decisions I'd ever made, because I felt that everyone I generally checked in with for advice was like, this is not the time to do it, or the role that I was at, I was a bit at a pinnacle of going to the next.
But there's never a good time to do it. If you think like that, you'll never do it.
Yeah. And that wasn't even my reasoning, that there's never a good time. I was really walking out of my comfort zone. So I told myself that how I feel is not okay. And so I should not continue by ignoring that. That was my only dialogue to self. And I just basically iterated that I have such intense love for this organization and how I've wanted to show up. This is the time for the organization to show up for me.
You. Yeah.
And if you absolutely cannot understand me, then it's also the end of an era maybe. I'm going to have to think of that, because I didn't feel good. I just knew that in myself, I didn't feel good, but I don't have any other logical ways of explaining why at this stage of your life are you slowing down? Are you taking a chapter for yourself? I didn't have any of those answers. So then, lo behold, I think you make a decision for yourself from a place of love. And my then management was literally in 5 to 7 minutes of the call sharing an experience of their own and saying, how this is important. And every 5 to 7 years, it's great to switch off and, have a pocket to build your own creative juices.
That's amazing that they understood that.
I know.
Yeah, that's really good.
I really think it's because I understood myself and I wasn't coming from a place of fear. The first time I was making a decision because I was like, I choose me. I don't know what it means, but I do not deserve to feel this way. So I do want to choose myself. And then I only informed like 2-3 very close people in my life because I didn't want any unsolicited advice. I didn't want anyone to explain to me that you'll be fine, just come back here, blah, blah, etc. Because I realized most people didn't get it. And I think the ones who've experienced it, like now I meet, like every person I share the story with has a story of their own, right? But then I met nobody. I met none of the people sharing such stories. So I think you just land up meeting the people who are vibrating at the same energy as you, and then it becomes very easy. You're in the flow. So I took the break, and it was, 2019 December, I think, if I'm not wrong. It was Christmas, New Year's. It was fantastic. I was like, wow, brilliant decision and just what I needed. And I kind of was like soaking in all the joy and all the good stuff. And then Jan comes in, and about like the second week of Jan, I don't know if that was depression because I never went to get it diagnosed, but I just felt this feeling of worthlessness. I was waking up every day. I would complain all the time that my calendar is full of meetings on top of meetings. And, you have these like days where you're like, somebody should stop having meetings because half of them are not productive. And suddenly you have nothing to complain. You don't have a team to manage. You don't have anyone to report into. You don't have any objectives. There's no vision you're running after.
How did you feel then? Because I had the same thing.
So
I had the nothingness led to like almost existential questioning.
Exactly.
Like, so what is life about? Like, why do I get up in the morning? Like all these crazy things.
That's why I had this horrible dip. And, I think the unknown or surrendering into the unknown is so scary.
Yeah, it's terrifying.
Even though I felt terrible,
I
didn't want to deal with this feeling. So there was that, internal sensation that I just want to so badly go back to work because this is a horrible feeling that you wake up every day and you're looking around, you're like, what is the point?
What am I going to do today?
What am I going to do today?
I don't have to do anything.
Why have I even woken up? Like, is there even any meaning to me waking up? And I think, to live that kind of emotion so isolated, like it's just not nice. It was not a nice feeling at all. So I went up to my mentor then and I said, and I had never shared with my mentor then that I basically got diagnosed with a potential burnout and I'm switching off. But I just said I'm switching off. So I went back to him and I said, you know what, I'm ready to come back. And in 3 hours or something, he said, I have an offer for you. And we had to get on a call the next day. And I took it.
At work, this is?
At work.
Okay,
and I said, yes, this is a mentor at work. And I just thought, you know what, I need to get back into the grind and this is not working for me. And I went back and I listened to the offer, the details, and I said yes. And it was for me to move to the UK. And I had moved back to Dubai at that point because I was like, I'm switching off, I'm coming home. And once I said yes and I got off that call, I just was like, what have I done? Because all of the exhaustion and the feelings and this emptiness and, cynicism, everything just starts like rising above. And I'm like, wow, why did I do all this just to not even give myself like a little time?
A break, yeah.
But at that point, I got this feeling or thought, and I think that's what changed it for me because I recognized in that moment that I don't know who I am without my job title. So
that's part of your identity.
Yes. And it wasn't a part. I recognized after that, accepting that offer, that it's all of my identity.
Wow.
That's why
super interesting, isn't it? Yeah.
It's all of who I am. So I took that away from me in the hope of looking for me or finding me or understanding who I am. And it was not interesting. It was equivalent to non-existing. I was just like, what is the purpose of every day? Why should I wake up? So if you can feel that dark because your job is not here to define your identity and your pay packet is not here to give you a sense of worth, that was the moment I think like an aha moment happened for me. And I was like, this is not possible. This cannot be my life. And I realized a job or your career or your work is one of the beautiful things that are a part of your identity, right? But there's got to be so much more. And I haven't invested in identifying myself in a multifaceted way.
Yeah.
And so
because we have got multiple roles.
Yeah.
It's really interesting. So like I did some work about 7 years ago with actually my mentor, Donny Epstein, who wrote this book. And he basically did a process that allowed me to realize your identity
Yeah.
can be totally transformed into whatever you want to be.
Yeah, makes
and I went from a process of my identity was very tied to like being a management consultant and acting a certain way and blah, 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 and being a father in a certain way and being all these roles in a certain way, to realizing I could create any sort of identity I want. And I went off and became a DJ in New York and had a radio show within 2 weeks of having this process and living in a different country and dressing differently and acting differently and then doing my management consultancy in a different style. And it was like, wow, like we can actually, like we need an identity because we, as souls, we need to express ourselves in a certain way in this world so that people recognize us and understand us and we can express ourselves. But we can decide that.
Yeah.
And it's very hard because our identity does not want to change. And as soon as it feels threatened, it gets very protective.
Exactly.
But the truth is it can be anything.
It can be
It's
anything.
really interesting.
It is. No, and you also recognize that if you went out, like nowadays, you know, you have a lot of these workshops or like I went on a healing retreat where you now ask someone like, hey, introduce yourself, but without your career
where you live,
or like, exactly.
what your career is, because that's the first two questions,
that's the
isn't
first
it?
thing you do. So
where'd you live? What's your job?
So you've kind of made it a mandate that if I am currently going to tell you I'm on a sabbatical, it's like you're useless because we haven't
it was like
really
me
given
with
permission.
nothing, saying I do nothing. Oh, well, you're useless.
But then I think when you finally understand that all of the things, like you said, your identity could be whatever you want it to be, and you could be multiple things, right? You could be multi-hyphenate at life. So then you do want to embrace that, hey, this chapter of mine is equally powerful like every other chapter, and this role of mine is equally powerful like all the other roles I want to play. But at that point, I think the world that I was coming from, the people that were my tribe, everyone that I was surrounding myself with, my culture,
you enjoyed your
upbringing,
identity.
I did, and I didn't know any better because no one disrupted that. No one set an example of being anything different. I never met a person who would have said I'm doing nothing, and even if I did, I would have judged you. I'm very open that I didn't know to think any better than what I knew.
And that's how our minds work. So like, I was having this conversation with someone yesterday, and like when someone says like, in Dubai, people say, where are you from? Where do you live? What do you do? And because what we want to do is we want to truncate in our minds. We want to put people into boxes. It's like, they're my type of person. They're not my type of person. It's your mind is doing this all the time, right? But the truth is we are these infinite beings and we have all these multifaceted like dimensions. So like, I'm really naughty because when someone says to me, where are you from? I say, well, I was born in the UK, but I've lived all over the world and I'm from Dubai, and so I'm international. I'm a human being. And that's totally like, and then they can't put me in that box. And then they say, what do you do? I say, well, I'm an entrepreneur. I have different businesses. And they're like, oh. So I think I'll do it on purpose so that people can't put me into little boxes. But our mind wants to do that. It really wants to do that.
It's easier to process, I think. And it's also immediately you're able to slot the person in a place, right? Like somehow, like, do I want to know you? Are you better than me? Are you doing
we're all relative.
You have to kind of put them in a place for you to be able to process. But I think this is such a disservice to yourself.
Because we're huge, like we're infinite beings.
We're infinite beings.
You probably don't even know everything about yourself.
No.
Like, I don't know everything about myself.
I realize the less I know about not just myself, about everything around. You really become a student of life. Like you enjoy this constant learning because I think you become more humble and you have like the ability to see yourself falter with a lot of love now. Whenever I goof up or I like regress or I fall back, I have so much more affection for myself because I'm like, hey, that's hard. And, I'm glad that you're seeing it or you're noticing it. So I think self-discovery for me, I feel it's been special even in that sense that you're somehow becoming even more excited to be alive. And you're becoming this
more curious and more fascinated. Exactly. There's a lot of energy in curiosity.
There's a lot of energy in curiosity, and I really think that I've always been curious, but not for myself. And I think it's just really nice to see that. Why would you not be for yourself? You're the first entity that executes on anything you desire. Shouldn't you be equally, if not more, curious about yourself?
I had a life-changing moment at my first ever Tony Robbins event that I went to, which was life-changing for me. And you might like him or you...
Everyone was has been to, I think, has had like an epic shift.
Yeah, and he's not for everybody, but
Yeah.
like there's some things that he did with me that just totally recalibrated everything, my existence. And one of them was he did a hypnosis session and regression where we went back to like the moment we were born.
Wow.
And we had to hold ourselves as a baby, like our older version of ourselves, hold ourselves as a baby, our baby version of ourselves, and look into our baby version of ourselves' eyes and just say, I love you and I'm going to take care of you.
Yeah.
Oh my God, like it gives me shivers just thinking about it. I was never like, my culture didn't believe in that. It was like, why would you love yourself? That's narcissism.
I know.
Do you know what I mean? Like, of course you should love yourself.
Yeah.
Like, you've been given this amazing existence. Like, you should enjoy every second of it, you know?
Oh my God. And we've somehow associated that with, I don't know, being conceited or selfish or self-obsessed.
Yeah.
But I mean, there is a thin line where you don't want to, you can
And some
understand.
people are like that.
Yeah, you understand, and I think they would understand that. But I think on a healthy standpoint, you realize it's literally like, you know, when you're on a plane and they say, put your oxygen mask on first. And then your child, like, you're wired the opposite, that you take care of your kid before you take care. But this is the survival moment, and it's basically being told to you that put your mask first so you can attend to your child properly. I think that's where it stems from.
The way I look at it now is like, if you don't have overflowing energy, how can you help anyone else? So you have to look after yourself and maintain your energy and make sure you're overflowing.
Yeah.
Because if you don't, you can't help anyone else. Like, you'll just suck their energy, you know? Yeah.
And I think when you want to serve from a place of purpose, especially, or just want to serve, even as parents, for example, you know you have to be there for your kids no matter what happens. You also want to know how to fill your own cup so that you can come from a place that is
abundance,
of value add and abundance for them. And even if you're, I think functioning on the bare minimum, you still know what it takes to fuel yourself so that you're here in the right intent for your children or for whoever you're trying to serve at large, right?
Totally.
And I think that begins with you. I feel like service begins with yourself, and then you know how to extrapolate to wherever and whoever you want to be able to cater to.
So what I was going to ask you next is, so you've been through this burnout or whatever you want to call it, overwhelm, and you've come out the other side, you started your job again. What made you want to help other people?
Yeah. So, I took the sabbatical for almost an entire year. And I think about 8 or 9 months into it, I went to Bali on a holiday, and one of the, the assignments, I was having a coach at that point, and one of the exercises was to list out, the things that I consider are my strengths. So this wasn't from a Gallup or any of that. All of those things we had done, but she wanted me to write from my own standpoint what I thought was my USP or strengths. And I found the exercise very awkward because I think I'd still not reached a place where I knew what it was to love me or to be comfortable with saying things that were nice about myself.
Yeah.
And even sometimes when people compliment you, now I'm so much more embracing, and I'm like, thank you so much, and I appreciate it. But then I would even cringe when people would compliment me because it just felt like something you're not
supposed
used to and you're not supposed to. So I sort of procrastinated on the exercise, and then I was very honest with the coach that, I don't feel comfortable doing this. So she gave me a really great idea, and she said, you know what, go to your closest circle and ask each of them, how did you impact them, or how did you inspire them?
That's a great one. Yeah.
And I was like, okay, that's a fantastic idea. And I'm a big birthday person. I make a lot of noise, and I'm like, all of June is my birthday month and all of that. So I wrote to my closest and I said, I don't want anything else for this birthday. I want a video from each of you just telling me how I've impacted you or inspired you.
Wow.
I think everyone found the idea completely what? Who does that? And so I think everybody liked it. And 2, everyone showed up. Even those people in my tribe who are not camera loving or don't want to be on camera, everyone showed up. And I was out, I think I went how you say on the A4 or ATV or something. I went on a jungle not dune bugging, that's a wrong word, but it was like one of those like in the jungle rides where you have your own ATV or whatever it's called. And I had a great day, but I saved like wanting to watch all this for like the end of the day. And I did, and it just, it was nothing but an insanely emotional experience. And when I was listening, I just realized that a lot of the things that I am discovering about myself, a lot of people in my circle already knew it or already saw it in me. And I never acknowledged that, or I never saw that in myself.
Yeah.
And there was this, feeling of, at that point, I didn't know what to call it, but I think today I would call it contentment. And I'm generally someone who's a hyperachiever, and I like to control my plans in life. Like, what am I going to do 5 years from now? Where am I going to be 3 years from now? What do I wish to do with this job? Like, I need to sort of have a sense of control over my plan. And here I am in this sabbatical with like no plan, no idea. Do I want to go back to Schlumberger or not? When do I want to go back? What do I want to do? I'm literally living in like a very free-flowing format, which is very unlike me. I overthink and analyze a lot. I wasn't thinking about anything. I was just exploring myself. And I thought, what is this feeling? And I was like, it's contentment.
That's nice.
And at that moment, I think I had this, I don't know, it was like a light bulb or whatever. I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm going to do something with this, because it made me realize that happiness is an inside job. So no matter what I was achieving in life, what accolades, what check boxes I was ticking.
It's not your circumstances.
I know. And that, I was always restless by nature, because I was never really catering to my inner blueprint. And so I think you can keep ticking things off, but you are never going to feel that sense of inner peace or contentment, because you're not aligning it with fueling your cup and like being curious about yourself and filling in what makes your eyes light up, right? Yeah. So I was serving the societal guidelines of success frameworks, and they are great frameworks. They're great guidelines.
They will get you so far.
Yeah. But
and you need to go through that.
You need to, but you also need to understand they're just guidelines. Yeah. So you take the guideline and you say, hey, what part of it works for you and what part of it doesn't, right? But you normally take the guideline and you make it Bible, and you're like, I gotta go. Like, I have to, this is what I'm running after. And that's when I realized I'm completely the opposite of who I am. I'm very present, I'm surrendered, I'm in this moment, and I feel contentment. I'm like, how did this happen to me? And so I figured that it's basically doing all the things I've been doing so far, but they had to be done in tandem with discovering myself. And so I just decided, I'm going to have to build a solution that takes this painful chapter and makes it my next 15, 20 years.
And this is it. This is it. Inside, what is it called?
Inside and Out.
Inside and Out. And there's a website, is there? Like,
this is yes. So
what's the URL?
So it's called joininsideandout.com.
There you go. Okay.
There you go. So that's what I say. I say, welcome to your new gym, but for the mind.
Nice.
Mental fitness. So yeah, and that's why mental fitness, because I think I felt that the experience that I had with the darkest chapter was very lonely, and it was very, how you say, like a dis-ease. I felt very uncomfortable to share with anyone, because no one really was talking about it, and you felt that when you did, nobody understood what you're feeling. And that pursuit of finding what am I struggling with, and then what to do from here, and the fear of taking a sabbatical, and then the discomfort of I'm beyond my job title, and then going on one, search of self-discovery to the other, to the other, to the other. I felt that journey eventually symbolized the journey with the body, because you don't go to the gym one day or to a yoga studio one day, do one Surya Namaskar or one bicep, and you're like, I'm done, I'm all set.
Yeah.
No, and you also have moments where you can fall off, you're on vacation, you decide not to, and it's hard to get back, but you do. Then you could develop an injury and you get yourself a doctor, get treated, and then you come back to build resilience again. So I figured that showing up is what brought me this aha moment. And I showed up even more on the days that I would wake up and feel like, what's the point today? Like, I'm going to have my ritual. I'm going to have my routine. I basically created an Outlook calendar, which had a ton of meetings with myself.
Oh,
so
wow.
I'm like, hey, I'm very
unusual,
used to
right?
it. Yeah, because you're used to a corporate rhythm and a sense of structure. I liked structure. So I was like, that's it. Waking up at 5 a.m. is a meeting in my calendar. It's just the only person showing up is me. I'm going to have like 9 to 11, I would worry every day because it felt very uncomfortable to be in the place. I'm like, Suchi, you have full permission to worry, but it's only the 2-hour window. And then 12, I had a personal trainer and I would go to the gym. So I thought it was perfect. I have to snap out of it, take a shower, get ready, go meet someone. And when you're working out, your brain is nowhere else but at the workout. So I kind of designed the calendar in a way, and I told myself that the only condition is if I was meeting Michael or meeting someone else, I would show up.
Yeah.
So just because it's only me, the fact that I choose to not show up is telling myself that I'm not worth it. So I have to make that commitment.
That's an interesting one. Yeah.
Exactly.
That's
so
interesting.
I think that's how I started building self-worth. And I also felt that what I'm used to or I like in terms of structure was met with this calendar, having these meetings that are set up to be with myself. And I got into that rhythm of Project Suchi. I really built that, work breakdown structure, but it was all about discovering me. And I was agile. Like as I would meet someone, I would talk to them. Like if you were talking energetics with me, I'd be like, what is that? And then if I found it interesting, I'll say, okay, I'll come in for that workshop. And I opened up my mind to
I love that you're applying like project management techniques to yourself.
Absolutely.
That's really cool.
I
think actually that's something I did at the time as well. When I was going through it, I had a very similar thing because I was learning agile and all these different project management techniques. And I was like, how do I apply that to me?
Yeah.
Like, so I can discover more about myself. It's really interesting, yeah.
And at that point, it was something that I was so comfortable with. I'd done so much of product development and I felt that this was something that, I'd been building teams and delivering products in the space. I was like, it's the same commitment should be for yourself, yes, that you have a vision and you're appraising yourself by watching your own growth. Because when it's like we like competition. But I looked at it as it's me versus me, So in Jan of 2020, I'm completely dark and, wondering what's the point of waking up. And then in November of 2020, I'm like, I'm going to build a brand. And I thought that's when you look back and you say, hey, that's your, end of your review. You rocked it.
Yeah.
And I think I wanted to have that breakdown structure because it was something I really thrived on as a person. So I was like, I want to bring it to myself and I'm familiar with that. I love that. It makes me feel a little bit grounded and I should respect that and do that. And if I say Project Suchi, let's deal with it in the same way,
And then you apply that to other people now. Is that the idea?
Very much, yes. So, that's one of the things I think with coaching, like I generally get feedback that it's very, like how you say, like Suchi, you're like strategy meets empathy. And I think it's because I do have that engineering and analytical side. So I do a lot of goal setting and I'm very strategic around it. But the parts that I didn't have before, which was to flex empathy, to flex, the ability to actively listen, the ability to say, I don't need to know everyone's every situation. You just have to know how to be able to ask these really powerful questions so they can go within and find their own answers, right? So I think this combination is interesting because one of the beauty or the beautiful things about coaching is it is a means to an end. You're not looking to be coached in the same space for 10 years. And even if you're being coached, you're constantly pushing the
you're
target,
a different person.
Right? You're a different person. So you have a newer target. Even if you wanted to up that, you're upping it or you're leveling up at another level now. So I really loved that. That's why I kind of also like switched away from a lot of mentoring at oil and gas, that I would do a lot of mentoring. And I was like, mentoring is great and it makes sense when you use it appropriately, but you take away from the person's ability to answer their own concerns, right?
Yeah, actually that's very much like part of our philosophy that like when that's why we actually don't call it coaching, interestingly, but we do coach.
But you're actually coaching.
Yeah,
I get it.
But the whole point is that people should come to their own conclusions. So it shouldn't be like us telling people what to do.
You're not advising
it's
all
like,
the time.
hey, well, what do you think if this happened?
Yeah,
like, so they're using their own mind and optimizing their own life.
And I think I loved that when I started to bring it into my life, because I realized when you mentor, people who come to me for mentoring is because they like your graph and they're inspired by it, right? But I realized that take that inspiration and I would want you to find your own graph.
Yeah.
But I think because you didn't know, you would normally answer questions that the person asks, like, how did you get there? Can you open that door for me? Can you talk to this person? And you would give advice on lessons learned and stuff, which is great.
Yeah.
But I think fusing it and blending it with coaching became something I really fell in love with. And initially I wasn't, loud about it. I was just doing it in my own network by word of mouth, because I also didn't know how to say I'm an engineer and a coach, then I'm an engineer and a coach and an entrepreneur. I didn't know it's okay. It's like you said, your identity is whatever you want it to be.
Whatever you want it to be, yeah.
So I was kind of hiding it for a while. Until one fine day I was like, you know what? I'm a multifaceted person. Life is a multi-hyphenate word. I'm all of these things, and I'm going to celebrate them and enjoy them. And it's what makes me feel fully alive. And that's where I'm at today.
I think also, like, when you go into these energy poor, dark places, all of a sudden the world collapses around you and you think it's just you.
It's just you.
Like, there's just you having this problem, nobody else having this problem. It's the worst thing possible. And I always remember, like, this was another thing at Tony Robbins, like, which helped me a lot. I walked into a room, there's 13,000 people there. And one of the questions he asked was around, like, what is the most painful thing for you? And I think what he did, he said, like, stand up if it's this, stand up if it's this. And one of the things was, I feel like I'm not good enough to be loved. Everybody stood up. It was like 13,000 people. You think, only I think that.
I know.
No, everybody thinks that.
Oh my
and all of a sudden that gives you this, like, liberation, because you're like, wow, like, that's not just me. And I never even was able to express that to anybody else, but I felt it. Like, I felt it so much, and everybody feels like this. And everybody has these times where they're just like, why am I doing this? Or all my, things in my body are trying to scream at me and I don't know what to do about it. So we all go through this, and I think when we realize that, it just allows us to breathe again and say, okay, it's okay to feel. I think that's a very important thing that we forget. It's okay to feel bad. It's okay to feel angry. It's okay to feel joy. It's okay to feel love. It's okay to feel all these things,
No, and I think, this whole toxic positivity, that's what I don't like about it, that all your emotions are here to tell you something, they're here to actually give you a signal or a trigger, or like valuable. For you to understand, hey, I'm not okay with this, or I feel blue about this, or this person is affecting me. You should invest in it. What I agree is that you don't have to wallow in it. You can invest in it to say, what do I do with it? What is it teaching me? How is this serving me? But you want to feel that emotion.
Feel it properly. Because as soon as you feel it properly, it will lose its charge.
It will lose, exactly. And you then can look at, what is it doing for me?
What is it trying to communicate?
What is it trying to tell me, right?
Exactly.
So you take the power away from it consuming you, but rather you say, teach me, teach me what you want to teach me. But instead, this toxic positivity is to, like, just constantly ignore the spectrum of emotions, and you're just always supposed to be happy, always supposed to be loud. And if you have a mellow day, you're in the hiding. If you're sad, then you're like, something is off with you, which I completely do not accept. And I think that is another aspect of mental fitness, that you do want to say that, hey, all feelings are valid.
All feelings are valid. Exactly.
And I want to give them the respect that they deserve, because I do think, for example, anger, I feel like a lot of my earlier life, I was always labeled the angry one. And I never understood why I had a short temper. I wish, not that I have any regrets, but I wish I did have an upbringing where my parents were curious. So why is she getting angry, But they knew what they knew, and I fully understand that. And I think in the process, you just hold a lot of hatred for yourself, because you're like, why do you get angry? And when you do, like, you lash out in a way where it's not nice. And then when I started working on myself, I understood that, anger is one of your ways to say, you're not listening to me. And it's not a nice way, but it's a way to say, I want to be heard, right? So then you say, why am I not being heard? What rooms and tables and seats am I sitting at that I'm not being heard? Then you want to say that it's got nothing to do with you. Maybe the person on the other side doesn't want to hear you. So you want to be calm about saying it's got nothing to do with you. And then I figured later on that once I healed or worked on my anger as, let's say, pent up energy that's always waiting to be pushed, and now I'm in a much more balanced energy place. Now when I feel angry, I respect it, because I'm like, what about this situation is not okay with me? And I look at it sometimes like it's a great fuel when you are, let's say, an activist. Like I don't know, believe in not wanting to eat animals, for example. So then I want to think, I want to read, I want to voice, I want to stand by it. I do use anger as a way to channel the purpose without being angry. Does that make sense? You now say, oh, I'm passionate about it.
Exactly.
And that you take the anger and you say, I want to convert it into passion, because you're respecting the emotion, right? So I do feel that dumbing down feelings is just not making sense.
Culturally, like I had a client last week who couldn't be angry at someone who deserved to be angry, because the cultural conditioning was you're not allowed, as a woman, you're not allowed to be angry at this person. But she was.
Yeah.
So the point is, like, we'll express that. And when you say express anger, it doesn't mean go and like punch someone in the face.
Yeah.
It actually means like go from a place of stuckness to claiming what you actually want.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So say like, I'm going to change this now. Yeah, I'm gonna, because we can change things. That's the thing. Like, we don't have to put up with something. So, say you're really angry in your job, like maybe use that anger to make a change that you want to.
Absolutely.
Like, have that conversation. Like, say I quit. Like, say I want a better promotion. Like, use it for whatever. But you don't have to punch people in the face.
You
know, you just use it as a powerful energy.
Absolutely.
You know.
And you can still, you can still find ways. Like, you could go pick up a sport like Smash Room or something where you go and release your inner pain if you want to do weight training, or go into boxing
to the gym.
or something.
Go to the box.
Find your own ways to be able to release, but don't forget the feeling. Like, you want to address, you want to respect that. You just don't want to come from an aggressive.
It's a very powerful energy.
Very much.
Very powerful, and you can use it in a positive way.
Very much.
Like my mentor says, like in the world, if you look at the news and you don't get angry at certain things, then you're not really human.
You're not.
Do you know what I mean? Like, you should be getting angry at certain things that are happening in the world.
Because there are things that are not actually in alignment.
They're not
with you.
acceptable.
Like, for example, if your values don't match, but you're constantly told to somehow adjust.
Yeah.
At some point, it's the only defense the body can have is to be angry, or you sort of play victim, right? You can have two sides of the same coin. And I think it's your way of saying, I'm not myself anymore. You know, I'm either submissed in the situation or I'm going to lash out. But I think it's a great emotional indicator to tell you that this is not, you know, being fair to you. There's something that's not okay.
Yeah. Another way you can make that change from stuckness to like claiming something new, to transforming, to changing, is playfulness, actually.
Yeah, very much. Oh my God.
Like, people forget this. Like, children are great at play, and actually that gives you the power to change as well.
Very much.
So there's different ways to get those transitions in your life.
You know, in the part that you just said that you're not alone, you know, I was thinking, like, yesterday, this is such a deeper level that you're realizing we're not alone, and honestly we're not. And I feel like the more you tell your story, the more you give people permission to be authentic and be okay with not being okay sometimes, right? But yesterday I read this really funny like joke. It was just a statement, and it said there are two types of people in a relationship. The one person who is a Scandinavian architect when it comes to organizing dishes, and the other person is like a raccoon who's running a meth lab. And you know, I am someone who's a Scandinavian architect when it comes to organizing dishes, like when they're at the sink. Like, they have to have like precision and order and everything, but I've always been like, this is such a psychotic thing to do. Like, I'm sure nobody does this, and I don't want anyone to know that I do this. And I read that and I'm like, oh my God, I feel so seen. That I was like, it's at every level. You're really not alone in your quirks, in your weirdness, in your pain, in your dis-ease. You're just never really alone. And it's really nice to know that the more you can see that, the more you can say that, the more you give yourself permission to heal, to work on yourself, to be happy, to be deserving, to feel like you're magical, to run after whatever you want, right? And I also feel it gives you permission to look at life as it's happening for you.
That's it.
You know?
Not to you, not against you. It's for you. Life is happening for you.
It's always in your favor, and it's where you're meeting it. Where you're looking at life and deciding to meet it, that's the story it wishes to play out for you. But it's always in your favor.
Yeah. So we were going to thank you for this. I think we should probably talk about Men's Mental Health Month, because you wanted to bring that up, didn't you?
Did you know that June is Men's
I didn't know that, actually, no.
I didn't until like a couple of days ago.
Men's Mental Health Month,
Yes. And, you know, I was just doing a bunch of research for our community page once I discovered that it's Men's Mental Health Awareness Month. And I realized that, as much as we currently, like, to niche out the brand, I want to work and cater towards a past version of me. So I'm like, we're catering to women and the high achieving women that are trying to redefine success for themselves as money, power, and mental fitness. But I was doing all the research and reading up on men, and then I realized that, there is an agenda from the get-go that men cannot express their feelings.
Correct.
Men being vulnerable is a sign of weakness. Women
Correct.
are not super comfortable when you have a man who cries a lot more, or is more, in touch with the sensitive side and things like that. And then at work, you hardly see any of these examples with like leaders who are, the epitome of success, or the ones you want to be inspired by. And I was just thinking, when I look at my process or journey of self-discovery, whether it's coaching or therapy or healing or wherever, I've always seen that 80 to 90% of the people at the time that I'm in those group sessions or workshops are women.
I totally agree. Yeah.
And there's 10 is also a big number. I would say 1% to 2% are men in those rooms, and you applaud them for saying, wow, you really have broken all kinds of barriers to say, I don't care, like, I want to choose myself.
Yeah.
But society would still look at a man who chooses to work on himself as something's off with you, you're cuckoo, or you've lost it, or you're weakish, or something like that, is what I feel why more and more men are still not in these rooms. You're not in these rooms of self-discovery.
It's interesting because you're right, because I go on a lot of retreats, and I would say like generally it's 80% women.
Yeah.
Apart from Tony Robbins, interestingly, that was about 50-50, because I think he's such a masculine guy that he appeals to like more masculine guys.
Which is very interesting.
Which is great, because he does allow them to explore emotions and all those things.
Really,
but you're right,
outside
of that world, I would say it's 80%, 20%,
it's a lot of,
pretty much everywhere.
And I realized that from doing that research that at least women, because I think we're more nurturing, we're comfortable being vulnerable, we are more ready to want to work on being a better version of yourself.
Yeah. And you're more aware of your emotions as well, and you express them more.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so now, even though you felt that the world told you shouldn't, you are more comfortable to get in touch to say, you know what, I want better for myself. And even with women friendships, right? Like, even in your friendships, you're a lot more transparent, vulnerable. You can have like a bunch of women hanging out together and maybe have a cry session together. Like, you're allowed that.
Guys would never do that.
Never.
We just
so
wouldn't
you
do
can't
that.
do that socially. And then you have the whole narrative on what a manly man should be. And then you have, this inability to it's like really unlearning a lot of this wiring.
We're programmed like this for a reason. You know, like, so if you go back to like the role of a man, like 2,000 years ago, like, but a big part of it was like defending the tribe and being able to go into battle at a drop of a hat.
Yes.
And if you're going into battle and you show any fear or you're crying or terrified, you're going to get killed.
Yeah.
You will get killed.
Yeah.
So you have to be able to control your emotions, block your emotions. And we have this ability to do that. We can literally switch off our emotions, but they're still there.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So like, that's the challenge for men, I think.
Exactly.
And then as well, like, there is a reality that like, if we're in a relationship with a woman and we're over emotional, she won't trust us.
Yes.
Because she wants to feel secure in her ability to express her emotions with a guy who is solid and steady and, like strong, right?
Yes.
So there is that reality that we're dealing with as well. But it's interesting because I was speaking to a guy today, and from his town in the UK, 3 guys had committed suicide this weekend.
Wow.
This weekend.
Oh my God, not even wow. What
yeah. And he said, like, he said, and his wife said, like, it's because they can't express their emotions. Like, they can't have these conversations. And he said, I will always tell all my guy friends, if you ever need anything, just call me.
Just call me.
And I do the same to my guy friends. But they don't always call because it's a weakness still,
It is.
Yeah.
And it's going back to how we started, right? The whole feminine and masculine energy.
Yeah.
I mean, it took me like the last 3-4 years of working on myself to understand that we all have feminine and masculine energies.
Yeah.
It's got nothing to do with I'm a woman, so I'm more feminine, you're a man, so we all have both, and we need to balance them.
Yeah.
So like, women had to suppress embracing being feminine, at least if you wanted to be in the work world or the corporate world, the man's world. I think men have had to suppress it from the get-go. So your things like empathy and spontaneity and creativity and being able to cry and feel your feelings, all of that, that whole energy is in an imbalance. And so I think, still understanding that a man, to be in the masculine, which is being more strategic and being more like planned, like you said, you're going to war, you know how to
focused,
execute.
all those things. Still important.
Will very much exist, and it will still be a strength and a trait to the masculine energy. But I think to not dab into the feminine makes a man imbalanced. And so with the pressures of society today, with the higher costs of living and inflation and expectations and the amount of distraction and all of that, I think it makes men probably struggle a lot more in silence. And so you have scenarios and cases like how you're describing, because there is no outlet and you're not given permission yet. And for an individual like you to give permission, you've done a lot of like unlearning. You're like, screw all that. Like, I need to feel okay.
Yeah.
But that's a lot of courage, a lot of work. And I was just understanding that when I was putting this little piece together, that for men, it's not just about showing up for yourself. It's even permission to show up for yourself, which women, that doesn't exist. To choose you is a big struggle. But when you do, the permission is within, because women are nurturers by default. But I think for men, it's not about showing up for yourself. It's even permission to show up for yourself. It's somehow not masculine.
Yeah.
But the point is that is where the magic or the success lies, that you recognize that you're both energies.
Yeah.
And so you have to give permission, because if you don't tap into your feminine, you're constantly living in imbalance.
So I'm just reflecting on this because I had an interesting experience last year where, I lost my father a long time ago.
Yeah.
And I was told, you can't show your feelings. I was told that.
Can you imagine?
Because I was the guy in the family then.
Yeah.
And I had to look after my mother and blah, blah, blah. And so I didn't grieve for my father. I think I told you this, for over 10 years.
Wow.
And then when it came out, it really came out. It was really strong. But I lost my mother last year, and again, I had to be strong because I had to plan the funeral and do these things, but I felt all that emotion in me. But I did hold it back. But I was aware that I was holding it back. That was the difference. I was aware.
Yeah.
And actually, the energetic people that I work with spotted that. They said, there's a lot of emotion inside of you. We can sense it.
Yeah.
And I gave myself permission to express that. But I didn't do it in public. Literally, I went and listened to some very sad songs.
Yeah.
And the sad songs triggered this emotion to come out. And I was like, wow, and it released.
Yeah.
And I was like, and it was quick. It was literally, I burst out crying for about 3 minutes, and then it passed.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, that emotion was there. And if I'd have just buried it, that would have stayed buried in me for a long time. But I allowed it to go through. And for a moment, it felt very helpless. It felt like, oh my God, I'm so helpless. And then it just passed.
Yeah.
And, I think having those tools and skill sets can really help guys.
Very much.
Just allow yourself to express those emotions sometimes.
And knowing your tools. That's why I
find the
constantly
tools.
keep coming back
A
calling it
sad
mental
song.
fitness.
I know it's ridiculous, but sad songs can allow you to express that emotion. But what you said earlier, you don't need to dwell in them. You don't need to wallow in them. Feel them and then let them pass.
And let them pass.
Yeah.
And then you might want to reflect on them. You might want to look at it more in a purposeful way, that what were you trying to tell me?
What was going on there?
But I think, these tools, the tools that make sense, like you said, it's silly listening to a song, but it's not. It's a tool that easily works for you. So
for me,
that's
it works.
why I'm like, why call it mental fitness? Because, not everybody likes doing Pilates, or everybody likes doing weight training, right? Or sometimes some people like variety. I feel like build your own toolkit. There is a multiple set of things to do.
Yeah.
But be excited to build a toolkit that every time you think of it, it grounds you. It helps you release. It helps you, I don't know, feel like I'm able to build a little bubble to recharge myself.
Yeah.
Whatever it is you need. But with cry, for instance, with women, and at least I was never really aware that, whenever we have our monthly cycles or our period, right, you always have PMS and you feel like your hormones are all over the place and you don't understand, or I never really took it seriously that I do have my mood fluctuations. And so I would think that an argument at that time is a legit argument, right? I'm really feeling this. And it took me years of working on myself to say, you know what, there is a bit of an imbalance going on in the body. It's really nice to practice solitude in that time. And then you read about it, the science tells you why you should, why it was actually created in this way, that you should spend some time reflecting, journaling, being in nature, like to heal, because your body is going through a whole new cycle. And I read this incredible line that like men have the same hormones for 12 months. Like women have every 28 days, you have
we have it every 24 hours. So we have a testosterone cycle every 24 hours.
Wow, I didn't even
know. So like, exactly. So the more you become aware of that, like you will get angry at certain times. You'll be very relaxed at certain times because your testosterone cycling.
It's flowing through you. So I started to recognize that if I have a cycle every 28 days and there is a stage where there's a switch happening, it's really nice to spend some alone time. And so I decided to schedule my cry therapy in that space because your moods are fluctuating, and I use songs that I just listen to them, and whatever, my nose twitches and my eyes go weird, and then I'm like bawling for an hour, and it's great. And then I was looking at the science behind it, because I found that when you cry, your tears contain cortisol. Believe it or not, the body
do you know there's some crazy things? So if a man smells a woman's tears, his testosterone drops to near to zero. So there's all this biological stuff going on that we're not even aware of.
So I was thinking that, if you don't know how to express what you're struggling with, you don't know how to articulate it, the body is so brilliant that it says, hey, when you cry, because your tears release cortisol, you immediately feel a sense of relief, right? It's like suddenly you're like, I'm kind of calmer. Like whatever I was at, that elevated state, it just comes to a balanced state. So I was thinking, this is brilliant. So you should be like, like a regular inventory cleaning. Like you have a cry therapy once a month to just cleanse. You may not know what it is you're releasing, but it's just pent up stuff from many different things that you've been doing and maybe spreading yourself too thin. And you just practice that.
The other thing that I'd say for men's mental health awareness is, so we have a little group, a local group, where we got together and last week we discussed happiness, right? And really interesting topic. One of the very interesting things that came out of it for me was the biggest research that ever was conducted on happiness. Found that our quality of life and happiness was directly affected by the quality of connections we have.
Oh, yes.
So being part of a community, having friends is really important. And I know like so many people struggle with that now. That even in a city like Dubai, people feel alone and disconnected. So if you can, like, find your tribe. It could be through a sport, it could be through a hobby, it could be through the coffee shop you go to. And I always say, like, just say hi to people, get to know people. Like, what's the worst that can happen is they might say, ignore you. But, that's the worst that can happen. The best that can happen is you make a friend for life.
No, I was watching this, as a part of the research, that the content we were putting together for Men's Mental Health Awareness Month, there was this piece by Trevor Noah where he talks about, men constantly in their circles have this conversation about the need and the constant deprivation of, like, I need to have sex, I have to have sex, I want sex, I have to have sex.
It's not that, it's intimacy, actually.
And it's connection.
Yeah, it's connection.
So he really highlights that we don't know how to look at what we really want, but we look at intimacy as that moment where you feel like you belong to someone, you feel like you can get hugged,
it's
you feel
connection
like you can be
and
touched,
intimacy,
you can talk, you can have a very, very like vulnerable moment, right? And then he was saying there's so much like research done where, when they interview a lot of the prostitutes around the world, where they talk about how so many men come to them, just pay them to say, just talk to me, just hold me, just hug me. And I think it comes back to what you're saying, not being able to build that tribe or connection, because you can be living in a country that's not yours, with family that you don't have, with a support system you don't have, and inculcating it is such an essential to your well-being. And I think just as much as you build a relationship with yourself, it's so essential to build a relationship with a support system that you could be yourself with, that you can share, that you can talk to. And I think it being one of the number one or number two reason even people say on their deathbeds, like there's that whole survey that says what is your number two, number three regret or something like that, is that I didn't invest more time and spend more time with the people that I love and care about. Because in the end, I think that is a big driver of your happiness.
Well, it's been proven. Like that was the whole research paper has showed that was the number one connection to happiness.
So, yeah, and it fully makes sense.
Yeah, and any other tips for men's mental health?
You know, I wouldn't want to say tip or anything, but I would really want to use this. There is a woman and a man in this platform, and I would want to say that both of us are working on ourselves. Both of us are able to see that the past version of us and who we are today is insanely liberating, powerful, content, and loving this journey we're on. I would want to use this opportunity to give permission to everyone, every man who's probably thinking he's alone, probably feeling suppressed on the inside and not being able to be himself, to say, oh my God, the world wants who you really, really are in the core. And the more you give yourself permission, the more men do that, and the more men want to show up for themselves and practice mental fitness, the world is just going to be an incredible place. And I think this is an essential, and I feel like if they needed a moment of permission, I'd like to take this opportunity that we're two people of opposite genders preaching and claiming and shouting the same message.
I think the big lessons for me as well is the word I-ness and the word wellness. There's something that separates them. Illness is an I, wellness is a we.
Wow.
Right?
I love that, yeah.
So the more you focus on yourself and how your life's awful, like you're gonna feel ill. Like you're gonna feel like that will drop your energy, right? But the more you realize you're part of this big system called humanity, and how can you contribute to that in many different ways? Because we all have gifts to bring. It could be just smiling at someone to make them feel like they've had a nice day. It could be just saying hello to someone. It could be helping someone cross the road. It can be all these little things. But when you contribute, like that gives you a sense of purpose and a sense of fulfillment that focusing on yourself just doesn't. And of course, you've got to do self-development and all these things. But the reason that you do this is so that you can have a bigger impact on the world eventually. So for me, like this illness versus wellness is really interesting. And just find your tribe. Realize there's always people out there who will help and all talk to you. People always show up for you. There's always someone who'll show up for you. Always someone.
And we live in a world today where we're so beautifully digitally connected that I think, there's the whole cons around Instagram and all of that, but the pros, I look at it as curate your feed. There's so many incredible male masculine, like The Rock talks about his depression, and Michael Phelps talks about his first therapy session that changed his entire life. Or you have Trevor Noah discussing connection is one of the most important things men should want to spend more time with. I feel like there's this incredible community on Instagram called Man Enough.
Is that right? Yeah.
Love it. It's a table of two men, one woman as hosts, and they always have a rotating guest. And the men and the women on the table are just incredible in bringing forth the struggles that either of them have had in terms of being able to see each other. But also these men are as man as you can be, and married and have families, and they're exploring their feminine energies and their masculine, and it's so insightful and so much of visibility in some of the struggles that men have with the wiring that you're given from the get-go. I think following these kind of spaces gives you a feeling you're never alone, and a permission to be comfortable with being not okay, or like to be able to talk about it, or to build a community, right? It gives you that permission. And I think if you don't want to be the loud change maker, at least make it for yourself. At least start for yourself. And one of the things I feel is once you start shifting, it's inevitable that the people around you feel your energy change, and they either want to onboard with you or they fall off, right? So you will then keep attracting the people who are more and more in the space of giving permission to work on yourself and to be okay with completely comfortable with the emotions and with the things that you've not been given permission that deal with your mental construct or well-being or however we want to call it, you know. And then I think practicing mental fitness as a lifestyle, you know, I say for the brand, like we're building the Nike meets Vogue of mental fitness, because I want it to be as Vogue as fashion is. It should be a conversation when you're sitting at a date, you know, where you say, so like, what is your morning ritual like? Or like, what are you working on? It should be an essential conversation. So I want it to be that. And Nike has always proved that they're bigger than just shoes, right? And so I want this to be a brand that tells you that looking within and checking in with yourself before you check in with the world, it should be a mainstream pop culture, entertainment, Vogue lifestyle. And it's because when you do that for yourself, automatically the ripple effect begins, right? Because your children see this version of you, your friends see that version of you.
That's what I was going to say, actually. Like, as the other tip that I would give is, like, choose a role model. Like, choose someone who you really admire and respect. And that's really important, like, because there are some bad, like, role models out there. You know, like, our leaders aren't always the best. Like, luckily in Dubai, we have great leadership, but, like, some of the leaders around the world aren't that great. And some of the people on social media who represent masculinity aren't that great. Some of them are. Like, so choose very carefully. And also realize that you are a role model. So like every time you go out into the world, you are a role model. So like I have two little boys. Like I am their role model. Like, so you have a responsibility there to create a better version of yourself, right? And when you realize that, like, it's very hard not to be engaged in this process, you know, because you have to show up.
You have to show up. You know, and anyways, like what is the study in psychology and the space of coaching and all that says that 80% of your personality is formed between the age of 2 to 9. And so if your parents are doing this parenting job for the first time, the best that a parent can do is to work on themselves. Because the better versions you keep unleashing, at least you know that you're giving your kid the toolkit that they need to be able to cope on their journey. You're just equipping them with the, look, life is going to be ups and downs and difficult and good moments, but at least, oh, you know, I kind of know that I want to meditate right now. I want to journal right now. It's okay to cry. It's okay to be vulnerable. So you have your own little toolkit.
And if your parents didn't give you that, like, just have compassion, because they were on their own learning journey as well. And guess what? Now you've got all the internet and the YouTubes and the resources to get that toolkit for yourself now as well. Maybe even teach your parents.
See, you know, sometimes that could be your karmic role, right? You might just be in that place where you signed a soul contract where you say, I'm going to help my parents see something they couldn't or they didn't know. But I do feel that social media, this is, you know, for me, one of the advantages. You completely can curate your content consumption, your feed, to be what you're looking for in terms of change, permission, inspiration, and how you want to like build your life. So I would say use that to your advantage. That's what I would like to say to men who are probably struggling with thinking they're alone and feeling alienated in being able to give themselves permission.
Thank you, Suchi. This has been amazing.
This was amazing.
You're epic as always. Great energy. And if anybody wants to contact you, it is
www.joininsideandout.com, and then we also have an Instagram page called Join Inside and Out.
Amazing.
I'd love to see everyone there, and thank you so much for listening.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Michael. This was amazing.